Well, here we go. Thank you, everyone, and it's really inspiring to be here. Let's have a big hand to Julia and Carlos and everyone who helped put this together and organize. Thank you so much. And a big hand to my wonderful spouse, Madeline, who's been with me now for over 30 years. And our mission is to veganize planet Earth. It's all about ahimsa, nonviolence, and celebrating the beauty of nature and of animals. How many of you by now have noticed that the Earth is beautiful? It's so beautiful, and the animals and all of us. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge the ugliness and horror of animal agriculture, and also to acknowledge the beauty of animals and of human beings at our core, our true nature, and to celebrate the beauty that we are and to remember that. And I think the fundamental thing, first of all, is that we're here for the National Animal Rights Day. There's right now, I think it's about 160 people gathering in cities all over the world for National Animal Rights Day. So let's take a moment of silence and just feel our connection with all the other activists and advocates for the rights of animals, and give thanks for them, give thanks for their efforts, give thanks for their caring hearts, give thanks for the awakening minds that they are working together with us to help bring into our planet for essentially becoming part of an awakening of human consciousness, that we may live our lives as we are intended on this beautiful planet, in harmony with each other, with animals, and with this beautiful natural world. And also, let's take a moment now in our hearts and just hold all of what we call animals, the living beings that we refer to as animals, in our hearts, and send them our love and our apologies for their suffering at human hands, and make our commitment that we will live every day, the rest of our lives, to do the best we can to be a force for healing and joy and freedom, kindness, justice, awareness, for the benefit of all living beings. And so it is. I'm so blessed that I figured it out, back in 1980. I've been a vegan for 45 years, and I just have to say, it just gets better every day. There's this kind of a narrative that we hear sometimes, people saying, well, veganism isn't natural, it's difficult, it's complicated, and when you get old, you'll probably fall apart. Well, here, I'm in my 70s. They have this test you can take to determine your biological age. And Madeline and I just recently did it. We're both in our 70s. She's a little bit beyond me in age, but she's the biological age of 35, and I'm 22. Yes. The thing is, I never did it. I didn't do it for my health. I really did it for the animals. And as a side benefit, I discovered eating plant-based foods with a sense of appreciation, whole organic plant-based foods is an amazing foundation for health for ourselves, and we're all interconnected. All life is interconnected. That's the fundamental teaching, and it's very inspiring to realize that we live in this world that could be so beautiful and healthy and free. There's nothing stopping us except for animal agriculture, this practice of looking with eyes that see a being, a commodity to be bought and sold, rather than seeing a being. And so veganism essentially is nothing in a way to be proud of. It's just simply coming home to our true nature and seeing beings when we see beings, rather than seeing commodities when we see commodities. And so the thing I have to really emphasize, which I'm sure we are all aware of, but the underlying idea is that everyone is wounded. And we're born into this world, and we're born smack dab right into a culture with 10,000 years of practice of dominating and exploiting animals for food as if it's just what we do. How many of you have read The World Peace Diet? Just I have a feeling. Some of you, yeah, maybe. So in that book, I go into this in depth, but I think it's very important to remember that historically we have 10,000 years of, it started in Iraq 10,000 years ago, of first it was wild sheep, and then wild goats, and about 2,000 years later, wild cows. And this whole transformation, a revolution in human culture happened back then. And the revolution was essentially the most devastating thing, really, because animals were reduced to mere either property objects or to being pests. They might somehow interfere with our property. And that led directly to the arising for the first time on planet Earth of a wealthy elite class who were wealthy and powerful because of one thing: they owned capital. Capita is the old Latin word that means head, as in head of sheep and goats and cows. And they discovered that the best way for them to get more wealth and more power was to go to war. And it's been the same way ever since. The way the wealthy class gets more wealth and power is to go to war. The oldest word for war on planet Earth is gavya, which literally means, the Sanskrit word means the desire for more cows. That's the oldest word for war, because they'd see another king with cows and sheep and goats, and they wanted to get that capital, that wealth. And whoever lost the war, not only did the animals become the property of the victors, but all of the people became the property of the victors. So we had slavery. It began with animal slavery, went to human slavery. And what I've discovered in my research is that everything we've done to animals, sooner or later, we've done to each other. And we've been warning, Madeline and I, for 35 years, traveling around all 50 states, over 50 countries, spreading the vegan message. We've given over 4,000 presentations, probably more than anyone in the history of human life has ever given, promoting veganism, because it's the greatest thing. You know, it's just like, it's a win-win-win. What else can you do but promote veganism? And we've been warning people and saying, if we're going to insist on microchipping and tracking and dominating and exploiting and force medicating millions of animals every single day, the same thing's going to happen to us. If we want freedom and happiness and harmony and health for ourselves, we need to give it to animals. But we shouldn't give it to animals because we want it for ourselves. We should give it to them because they deserve to have freedom and harmony and not be in our hands and be crushed and destroyed as mere objects. So the thing to understand is that this whole mentality of animal agriculture that started and grew and spread, it caused the domination of animals, the rise of a wealthy elite class, the creation of war and slavery, the domination of women, because basically animal agriculture is not merely human beings dominating animals. More accurately, it's male human beings dominating female animals. I mean, it's really about the domination and exploitation of the feminine capacity to love and nurture and protect life. That's what the heart and core and soul of animal agriculture is. We really have to understand that. It's not merely killing animals or imprisoning them. It's three things. It's killing them, imprisoning them, but neither one of those would be possible without the forced impregnation against their will of female animals, but again, by the millions every day. So there's sexual violence at the very core of this that is so hideous. And so our ancestors really crossed a line back 10,000 years ago, and they started owning animals and impregnating them. And then the very first science was human beings figuring out how to more efficiently dominate and exploit animals to get more milk and more wool and more meat and so forth. So science has been used, and from the very beginning, to dominate and exploit nature and animals, and as we can see now in many ways, human beings as well. So the foundation really is liberation of the feminine, the sacred feminine within all of us, and liberating animals and reconnecting with the earth and reconnecting with nature. And I know when I first started learning about this, I just wanted everyone to go vegan. I would like go up and say, I'm going to shake you until you go vegan, right? And I realized gradually that people are wounded, and when someone is wounded, I'm not going to spit on them and yell at them and shame them, blame them, criticize them. You know, the best thing really is to try to do the best we can to embody what veganism is, which is love and kindness and caring for all living beings, animals and human animals, each other as well, to create a movement of kindness and love and caring for each other and for animals, and to do the inner work that is so necessary, to question the official narratives in our society that promote violence and abuse. And it's so interesting. When I was a little kid, I was born and raised in Concord, Massachusetts, and that was actually years, ago in the past, in the 1840s and 50s. They had the Transcendentalist movement, and so I was born in Emerson Hospital, went to Thoreau School, Alcott School, learned to swim in Walden Pond, and there was this whole feeling of the Transcendentalists, and they actually created a vegan community called Fruitlands back in the 1840s. They wouldn't wear they wouldn't eat meat, dairy, or eggs. They wouldn't wear wool, silk, or leather. They wouldn't even wear cotton, because back then cotton came from slaves. So these are the hardcore vegan community way back in the mid-1800s. But my family, we ate the usual meals of lots of meat, dairy, and eggs. I didn't question it. And when I asked my mother about it, I said, Mom, the food we're eating, is that what everybody eats? My mother said, yeah, that's what everybody eats. And then she left, and then she came back and said, well, that's not totally true. There are vegetarians. And I had never heard that word in my life, and I was at the age when I liked to learn new words, especially if they were kind of long. So I said, what's a vegetarian? And she said, a vegetarian is someone who, don't worry about it, you're never going to meet one. I don't know where they get their protein. So that was the end of it. I never heard the word again. I went on my way. I was eating meat, dairy, and eggs like everybody else. And I went away to a summer camp in Vermont, one of those little camps that's nestled away in the Green Mountains where nothing bad can ever happen. And there was a little farm, and there was so I learned as a little kid, 13 years old, 14 years old, I went there a few years. Part of it was to catch my own chicken, hold her down, have my axe, cut her head off, put her through the scalding tank. And I remember when I did that, I did not like to do it, but I knew, because I had gone through at that point the most intense indoctrination a human being can possibly go through. 13 years, every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I was eating the mentality that God gave us certain animals to eat. They don't have a soul like we do. They taste good. If you don't eat them, you're going to die within 24 hours of a protein deficiency. That was it. So I just, sure, I'm a 13-year-old. A man's got to do what a man's got to do. I can kill the chicken, and we can do that. And so it's really a wound. We get our natural empathy and compassion gets crushed because we're born and raised in this milieu of eating animal-based foods. And it was very interesting because it was also a dairy, and every year we would gather around one of the dairy cows, and the guy that owned the whole thing, he'd say, well, she's too old now, so we can't use her for milk anymore, we're going to use her for meat. And we'd say, how old is she? And he'd say, she's 5 years old. Cows will live 20 to 25 years naturally. On any dairy, organic or not, by the time they reach 5 years old, they're worn out. They've been kept pregnant and lactating simultaneously, which no mammal is designed to ever tolerate that. So they're worn out. But one of the offspring, one of the children of the cow, who's a female, will take the place of the cow, and so they just kill them because it's more profitable. And so this is the underlying dark side of dairy, is there's so much killing. And I remember the first year we did the killing, we did it in a barn, and then we had a gun right here. We pulled the trigger like 6 times before the poor cow finally crashed. And it was shocking because there's just so much, it's just, everything gushes out. He had to cut, this is interesting. I mean, actually, when you think about it, he had to cut these arteries immediately. And when he did that, the heart was beating, and so the blood went about 20 feet in the air, being pumped. And he wiped his brow very calmly and matter of fact, and he said, you've got to do that. You've got to cut the arteries immediately. Otherwise, the flesh, the meat will be soggy, and we don't want soggy meat. So now I understand. Madeline and I have gone to slaughterhouses, we've gone to factory farms, we've gone to stockyards, we've traveled, we've seen the hell that these animals have to go through. And the reason animals suffer so much in slaughterhouses is because we don't want soggy meat. That's it. You can't just kill an animal and then come back later and cut the animal up. No, they have to die by bleeding out because the heart has to pump the blood out of the flesh. That's the most terrifying, painful way to be killed, but that's what we do millions of times every single day, and that's what people are eating. So I saw all that, I participated in that, but I couldn't see it because but the interesting thing also was the following year, we did it again, but the fellow said, well, we don't want to do it on the barn. It made a huge mess of blood and everything on the barn, so we'll do it over on this little grassy knoll. So we said, okay, so we started getting the cow, pulling her up to the grassy knoll, and we had like 30 kids in this cow, and she was stronger than we were. We couldn't pull her. And so we did what we always do. Basically, we just overwhelmed the cow with superior force, and they got a pickup truck, 4-wheel drive, and a chain, and put it around her neck, and just pulled her up there. And I was riding in the back of the pickup truck, and I remember as we got up there, close to where we're going to kill her, suddenly she broke the chain. She was pulling so hard, she broke the chain. And the truck lurched forward, everybody fell down, and I got up and I looked, and I saw this cow looking up at us with this chain hanging off of her neck. And she wasn't saying anything, but she was speaking very loudly. And she was saying, I don't want to be killed. Don't kill me. But there was no way out. They're born to be killed. That's the whole purpose. And so this is the underlying invisible spinning fury at the core of our culture. If you want to know why we have the disease and the craziness and the war and the conflict and the injustice and everything else, just look at what's on our plates. That's the reason. And until we as a species mature spiritually and cognitively and culturally to the point where we give freedom to those who we have in our hands and let them live their lives instead of just crushing and destroying them unnecessarily. I mean, here I am, 45 years of vegan. I'm not dying of a protein deficiency. It's the most fantastic thing. We can all thrive and be much healthier. So to just do everything we can every day to try to not only share this message, but to live this message as kindness and compassion for animals and for each other, and that will be a life well lived. The thing is, our life goes by quickly. I'm amazed. It was just the other day, I was in my 20s, and I was living I was a Zen monk in Korea, in a vegan community in Korea. They've been practicing. It was so interesting because right after I graduated from college in Colby College in Maine, in 1975, I went on a spiritual pilgrimage with my brother, and we thought we were going to walk all the way to California, because the only way you could attain cosmic consciousness was to go to California in 1975. San Francisco, here we come. We're in San Francisco. This is the patron city of the patron saint of St. Francis. We should really remember that, celebrate. St. Francis is the great lover of animals. And so anyway, we eventually did get to San Francisco, but we got as far as Buffalo, and then it was getting really cold. It was October, so we walked south all the way to Alabama with no money. And we ended up at a community in Tennessee on the way called The Farm, which was the largest hippie commune in the world, and they were all from San Francisco. And so that was it. They were all vegans. No one knew the word vegan in 1975 when I was at this community. But there was no meat, no dairy, no eggs, and no honey, and basically it was a vegan community, 900 people, 200 children, vegan from birth, that were living there in 1975, south of Nashville. And so that was it. I've never eaten meat in my life, because I said, why are you guys vegetarian? You couldn't say vegan, no one knew the word, but vegetarian, why are you doing it? And the guy said, well, because most of the food we're growing, we're feeding to animals while people are starving. We could feed everyone on a fraction of the land, and this is really true. If we care about human beings, we should all be vegan, because the wastefulness of animal agriculture, destroying ecosystems, causing starvation, which causes war and conflict and injustice. And he said there's two reasons. One is that. The other reason is, do you know what the animals go through? And I said, oh, don't tell me, I don't want to hear it. But he told me about the mutilations and the hyper-confinement and the abuse. But the best thing was, we were eating together, and there were always meals that were totally plant-based, right? That's what we ate. And it was so great. We made the very first ever vegan ice cream on planet Earth. It was called Ice Bean. We invented it. We would take soybeans and we would grind it up, and we'd make the soy milk, and then we'd add thickener and freeze it and some sugar, and there it was. It was terrible, but we thought, well, it's not too bad, Vegan vegetarian ice cream, we called it, But it was so great to be in on and I found out when I met Madeline years later, the same month and year in Switzerland, she became, also did the same thing, never stopped, never ate meat again in her life. Then a few years later, I got out here, I was living in San Francisco, Tibetan Buddhist Center over here, and I became a vegan in 1980, and then a few years after that, I went to a monastery in South Korea. I was living as a Zen monk, shaved my head, and this was a community that had been practicing vegan living for 750 years. For 750 years in this community, there was no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no wool, no silk, no leather, no killing insects. You just practiced ahimsa, nonviolence. We were meditating from 3 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, just going deeper and deeper into a direct experience of the true nature, that what we are was never born and will never die. We are eternal consciousness. We're on this earth for a few short decades. It goes by very quickly. So for every day, wake up and give thanks for another day to learn, to grow, to contribute, and to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, to build the foundation of a society of peace and freedom and justice and equality for all. Each one of us can do that for the time we're on this earth, and when we do that, we can be an example, and we can transform the experience of humanity on this earth. So go forth, everyone, multiply the message, and remember, we are the force, we are the ones, we are the love. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Bless you all. Go organic, vegan. Thank you. Thank you.